We analyzed the performance of the Baltimore Ravens coaching staff so far through the 2023 season. All that and more coming up next during this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens. We're a daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available all podcasting platforms. That includes over in video form on YouTube. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We are back here with another episode as the Ravens pull out a 20-10 win over the Los Angeles Chargers in Week 12. And we have all the Ravens news, analysis, updates, and much more for you on a daily basis, 5 days a week, every single weekday. No breaks. We did it over Thanksgiving. We'll do it over Christmas as well. All the holidays, we still have Ravens content as well as every single other weekday as well. Plus that bonus content, live shows for games, for big news. So it's a lot going on here on Locked On Ravens. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow along in audio form wherever you get your podcasts to. I really appreciate all of this support here. It's meant a lot to me as we continue to build all these communities, and it's been really awesome to see the growth of everything. So thank you for that, whether you're in every day or you listen to the show every day. If it's your first time in, welcome in. If you're somewhere in the middle, of course, I appreciate you as well. But the Ravens are in their bye week right now, Week 13. John Harbaugh revealing yesterday he's given the players the week off. So should be a good time for the players, the coaches, the organization to retool, rest, reset, all the R's of a bye week, which I think is going to be really important for them. But with the bye week, I think it's a time for us too to take a general perspective of things. So today I want to talk about the coaching staff. We'll talk it. It's pretty straightforward. We'll do 3 segments, 3 coaches: John Harbaugh, Todd Monken, Mike Macdonald. We'll do John Harbaugh in the first segment, Todd Monken in the second, Mike Macdonald in the third. So there's a lot to talk about. Let's just dive right in here. John Harbaugh first. John Harbaugh is very controversial, I think, in Baltimore circles with the Ravens fans and really people who watch this team. I think there are many varying opinions of John Harbaugh. I talked about it yesterday. I've talked about it so many times. Again, if you're an everyday, you're probably sick of me talking about John Harbaugh. I think he's a really good coach. I do. I think he's a top coach in this league, but he does make some blunders. And look, every coach does. I'm not saying every NFL coach is perfect and then John Harbaugh is not. I'm not saying that. But for a team with high expectations like the Ravens have year in and year out, I know the playoff success has been lackluster, and I think the importance of kind of having a fair analysis on things where it's my job to, again, critique when someone deserves to be critiqued and praise when someone deserves to be praised. I think John Harbaugh deserves to have both. I think the praise is the fact that, look, he's a player's coach. I give him a lot of credit for kind of shifting his coaching style over the years. I mean, if you remember, early John Harbaugh was not a player's guy. I think he came in to a head coaching job as a young coach too, young special teams guy, and tried to establish, hey, this is how I want to do things. This is how we're going to do it. And obviously with very strong-minded veterans in that locker room like Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and Terrell Suggs, that just was not going to fly. And we saw and we heard in multiple reports of John Harbaugh and the players clashing, players-only meetings, and all these, like the come to Jesus meetings, I guess. But John Harbaugh has, I guess, changed his coaching style now to be somebody that guys want to play for. It's that motivational factor. And I give him a lot of credit for that. But there have been instances, and it's not just a this year thing, it does go back, where some of the situational awareness and just decisions in general have not been there. But I think the gripe with a lot of people is the playoff success. As I've said before, and I'll say it again, they have not made the AFC Championship game since the 2012-2013 season, haven't made it back to the Super Bowl, obviously, as that would entail since then as well. Those early days with Joe Flacco and John Harbaugh, those were great. And I'm kind of just reminiscing on the past year for the first couple of minutes because you move into the present day. And we've seen these last couple of seasons. Look, John Harbaugh's had to deal with a lot of injuries over the past couple of seasons. It's fair to say, we talk about what ifs all the time on this show. What if Lamar Jackson was healthy for the past 2 seasons? What if, right? This, that, and the other. But again, sometimes coaches get dealt bad hands, and it's a thing. But what if we talk about what ifs, what if John Harbaugh, after, again, I think a blunder against the Colts, not telling Zay Flowers what to do, not having his guys ready to play against the Steelers, that was a game that had some questionable things in it as well, decisions and whatnot. We saw, last year and 2 years ago, all that controversy about John Harbaugh, the 2-point conversions, the going for it on 4th downs, how he tried to essentially win all those games and came up short in nearly every one by, instead of going for the tie, going for the win. And by nature, again, part of that I think had to do with injuries, but John Harbaugh has been, I think, a controversial coach, and I think more controversial. You look at the record and saying, well, how is this guy controversial? He has such a good regular season record. He's a player's guy. But you talk about the playoffs, and I think that's where people are the most scared, because you look at what happened against the Chargers on Sunday, and John Harbaugh defended his challenges. I don't necessarily agree with his reasoning. I understand where he's coming from, but I don't think, and I honestly don't even think it's a full John Harbaugh issue. Like, I think that guys in the booth just have to be better. Like, they have to be a lot better with getting in John Harbaugh's ear and saying, look, we have this, we can challenge it. And he explained on the road, it's a little more difficult, and there are layers to it. I'm not just trying to pile on John Harbaugh right now. But again, he's not going to get fired during the season. That would be malpractice. In my opinion, it's not going to happen. We don't have to have that conversation. In the offseason, if it's a wild card exit, if it's a divisional round exit, as I've said so many times here on the show, then that conversation can be had. And we will see what the pulse of the organization is, how they feel about it. I wouldn't say, though, that it's a guarantee they do fire him, because if you fire a guy like John Harbaugh, you have to be sure that you're going to get a coach as good, if not better. If John Harbaugh gets fired, he's a good coach, and 10-plus teams will be lining up out the door to get him into their building to be their head coach. That's just how it works. Sometimes good things come to an end. Sometimes a change is needed, right? And we'll talk about Macdonald in the final part of the show. But in terms of how he's done this year, look, he has his team at 9-3 at the top of the AFC. You can't discount that. I think that with the expectations the Ravens have, there's a lot of, the Ravens have to be perfect in this way, and if there's any blunder, someone has to have consequences. Someone has to get fired. Someone has to be responsible. And sure, you got to take responsibility. You got to take accountability. And here I will say, look, this is what happened. This is the guy who's at fault. But every team has bad losses. Every team has bad blunders. The Ravens have been lucky to have a coach like John Harbaugh and have this consistency where we've seen coaches go, and Frank Reich gets fired after one year, less than one season in Carolina, after Matt Rule gets fired after a disaster. So there are worse situations to be in 100% than having John Harbaugh as your head coach. But I think he's done fine. Has it been perfect? No. Have there been moments of frustration? Sure. But 9-3 atop the AFC. We're going to find out a lot about him, about this team over the last 5 weeks of the season. And obviously in the playoffs, assuming they make it there, they're going to make it there. But just, it's not a formality yet, so I'm not going to talk as if it is. But overall, John Harbaugh is going to have to make sure that it's not just the team that has to ramp up and peak. He himself has to ramp up and peak as well, because games are not just won and lost on the field solely. It is a coach. You can go to the Chargers, right? Brandon Staley has that team in the worst possible spot right now. It's a terrible coaching situation there. They have talent. I'm not saying their roster is the best in the NFL, but they should be better than what they are. But they're just a dumpster fire because of Brandon Staley. So John Harbaugh's a guy that, again, in the locker room, he's awesome. The players rally around him. They want to go to war for him. They want to play for him. And that holds weight. That absolutely holds weight. But we're going to have to see how this team, and John Harbaugh is a part of the team. He doesn't go out there and throw passes or pick off passes, but he's a part of the team. So he's done fine, in my opinion. I'm not going to sit here and say he's a terrible coach, because I don't believe it. I think he's a good one. But I do understand the frustration that, hey, look, the Ravens have not had the playoff success that we saw early in his tenure, and something needs to change there because, look, the goal isn't regular season wins. The goal is a Super Bowl. The goal is getting to a championship, winning a championship. And if there's not progression and not growth, the Ravens have fired both coordinators. So I am sure that there will be conversations in the offseason if it does not go according to plan. for this Ravens team. But coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk about if the Ravens offense is going according to plan so far, with Todd Monken assessing his performance as the Ravens again in this bye week. So be sure to stay tuned, plenty to talk about on the show. First, this episode is brought to you by Gametime, and there have been plenty of frustrating ticket buying experiences I've had in my life, for sure. Sometimes I wasn't sure if there were seats available that were even good. Sometimes I couldn't find last-minute tickets, and sometimes there were just no good deals at all. But you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With current last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And the Gametime app is really great. It's super easy to use too. And obviously the Ravens on their bye this week, but they're going to have some interesting games coming up for them. I think it's going to be exciting to see them play against some of these teams here at home, M&T Bank Stadium. They go on the road for a couple primetime games, but you can tickets to the Rams, tickets to the Dolphins, tickets to the Steelers. There are those available on Gametime. Plus, they have last-minute ticket deals, flash deals, zone deals as well. And Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See all the views from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. And they're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsor deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime's last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We're back. It's our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still with you on this Taco Tuesday. I appreciate everybody tuning in and getting into this coaching staff assessment. We talked John Harbaugh in the first segment, but let's talk Todd Monken now. The Ravens' big ticket hire of the 2023 offseason was a long, extensive process to replace Greg Roman, and I'm going to be excited to see how we talk about this in a couple months once the season is over, hopefully in February after they win the Super Bowl, but obviously we have a long way to go until then. But for what we've seen so far, we've definitely seen some good, we've definitely seen some bad, we've definitely seen some pretty stuff, we've definitely seen some ugly stuff. So it's been a mixed bag for Todd Monken for sure. I was expecting to, let's start with the bad first, and we'll get into the good just to get the bad out of the way. I was expecting a little more, I don't know if situational awareness is the right word, because I do think Todd Monken is situationally aware. I just think sometimes he's trying to be too cute with things and just doesn't utilize the personnel correctly, if that makes sense. And what I mean by that is, for example, I don't think he's utilized Zay Flowers well consistently all season. I think that there have been spurts where, again, you get the ball in his hands in space, you go deep with him, you're able to you use his strengths, right? But there have been other times, the screen passes, the reverses, the trickeration, that hasn't really worked. And I think Todd Monken has gotten a little too hung up on that aspect of things. I also think, again, with the running game, the Ravens will be dominating a game on the ground. Todd Monken will start to throw it. Kind of like what we saw with Greg Roman, obviously not to the extent, I don't think, but it kind of has, it's like, oh, we've seen this before where Ravens are pounding the ball down a team's throat, and all of a sudden it's pass, and trying to get that figured out. So again, you bring Todd Monken into what? It's not to change the run game. It's not to figure that out. The Ravens have had that figured out for years now. It's to make the passing game more diverse, more creative. And Todd Monken's addition was also an addition to their roster, because I'm not sure if Odell comes if Todd Monken isn't here. I'm not sure if Zay Flowers gets drafted if Todd Monken isn't here, right? The offense under Todd Monken, I think it has been more up-tempo. The Ravens, the thing that I noticed with Monken's offense, which I do like, and it's not necessarily a good or a bad thing, but personally I think it's just efficient. The Ravens have been efficient with their drives when they're on. When they're on, it's not, oh, they have to hold the ball for 10 minutes and they're going to run the clock down and try to drain it all, win the time possession battle by 10, 15 minutes. They go 8 plays, 70 yards in 3 minutes and 50 seconds, right? It's those types of drives that can just deflate an opposing defense. And I think part of what Todd Monken has done, which I think has just, it's contributed so much to what Lamar's been able to do this year as a quarterback, is Todd Monken comes in, and essentially, as we know, we talked about it all offseason, he and John Harbaugh hand the keys to Lamar. Part of what makes John Harbaugh a good coach is he's a player empowerer, if empower is a word, but he empowers his players, and I think Todd Monken does the exact same thing, the camaraderie. If you were watching Lamar and Greg Roman interact, how Lamar talked about Greg Roman, it didn't seem like there was much of a spark there, much camaraderie. It didn't seem like there was much of a relationship. It seems like Lamar and Todd Monken, they're open with each other, they're honest with each other, and they communicate in a way that has given Lamar confidence within the offense. And not that Lamar ever lacked confidence in himself, right? I know he believes in himself to the fullest, but I think he lacked confidence in the offense to say, hey, I can only do this or I can only do that, where this offense has opened up things for him. And I think for Lamar, what I would like to see out of Todd Monken a little more, it's two things. One, I think they should try to push the ball down the field a little more. I know they've done it, and part of it is Lamar just hasn't been able to hit those deep shots, right? It's the deep ball accuracy has not been there for Lamar this season. Wasn't really there for him last season either. After being a decently good deep passer his first couple years in the league, he's kind of fallen off for him. But I think utilizing Zay Flowers that way, Rashad Bateman can beat somebody deep. We've seen it with Odell too. But utilizing guys on crossers, guys on slants, guys on comebacks, they've done that. They've picked up yards that way, and I think that's been really impressive. But the other thing I'd like to see is for the Ravens to be more spread out. And I talked about this on the live stream. I talked about this, I think, a little bit on yesterday's show too. And even with Mark Andrews, I know it's tough with the Andrews injury because it hurts so much. And Todd Monken has definitely tried to put Andrews in situations. And honestly, it's not hard to put Mark Andrews in a situation to succeed because he does the street ball thing. He kind of does his own thing sometimes. He has such a feel for the game. But if you spread these guys out, you spread this offense out, if it's 4 wide, if it's 3 wide and a tight end in the slot, it's so hard for defenses because part of it is the Ravens run game is really good this year. I mean, let's look at the stats quickly. I pulled them up. I forgot to use them at first here, but thankfully I remembered. The Ravens have been a great team this year, efficiency-wise. They're a top 10 offense this year, both rushing and passing. I know they've been a little inconsistent. I know they've been up and down, but they scored 30-plus points in 5 straight games before the Chargers game. But they're second in the league in rushing with 4.9 yards per attempt, and they're 7th in the league in passing with 6.7 yards per attempt. The Ravens, to me, effectively on offense, if you have those 4 wide, if you have the tight end in the slot, whatever, I know that teams can blitz, teams can do that, but there are multiple different options. You put Lamar in the shotgun, you put a running back next to him. If all these guys are spread out, you have probably one linebacker in the middle, and it's a 4-man rush, unless the team decides to blitz. If the team decides to blitz, yeah, you have short stuff. You can do a check down, you can do a screen, get the ball out quickly. But those non-stacked boxes give you the opportunity to read option, to draw. There are so many things that an offense can do in spread formation, especially when you have to key and account for the quarterback like Lamar, who is so dangerous. So that's what I'd like to see. But I do think the offense looks smoother under Todd Monken. Part of it, too, is he hasn't been helped out by his offensive line at times this year. I think the offensive line has been somewhat inconsistent to the point where it has definitely hindered what the team has to do on offense, and they have to bring blockers over to one side, blockers over to the other side just to help out. But the offense looks smoother. It's definitely more efficient. And for everything that Todd Monken has done this year, I think that it has been overall positive. I know that I'd like to see a little bit more from Monken. I think that, again, I didn't expect this level of inconsistency this late into the season. As I said before, and as I've said many times, it was never going to be the Ravens scoring 25-plus points a game every single game and just blowing teams out. It was going to take some time, but I just think that it's been a little bit of a process. And I do have to, let's be honest about it. The Ravens had a ton of injuries early. They didn't have their personnel. They were rotating guys in and out. So they were just starting to find that stride. But it just feels like the frustrating part with the offense is they show up for a half or for a couple drives, and then they kind of go dark. They don't really do anything for the rest of the game. So that's what's been frustrating for a lot of people. Hopefully they can just be more consistent with that because they are a top 10 unit stats-wise, but they can put together these full 60 minutes like we saw against the Lions, like we saw against the Seahawks. It can go a long way for them for sure. Coming up, though, we will talk about the legend of Mike Macdonald and just how incredible he's been for this Ravens team. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to get to on the show. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options that include spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. If you pick Zay Flowers anytime touchdown, FanDuel, you were living large on that. Pick Zay Flowers 2 touchdowns. I know that Lamar didn't necessarily have the best day, but he was still doing his thing. And if you picked some sacks, those player props on Ravens, you probably had a good day over on FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, kick off the NFL season, FanDuel official partner of the NFL. We're back here rounding out Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher still talking with you here on this Taco Tuesday. Be sure to subscribe to this show, whether you're in audio form, anywhere you get your podcast, video form on YouTube. You're not missing out either way. If you're listening one day in video form, maybe you're just hanging out on the couch, watch it on your phone, watch it on TV, or maybe you're driving to work, you want to listen on your phone. Don't watch while you're driving. Listen while you're driving, watch while you're hanging out, but you can do it either way. And Locked On Ravens, we got you over here, same show. So you can find us anywhere you get your podcast and, of course, on YouTube. Thank you for all the support as well. But Mike Macdonald's been awesome this year. He's been incredible. And we have to talk about it because this is his second season. Definitely had some growing pains earlier in his first year last year. I think the Dolphins game we can all point to week 2, which we don't have to talk about. I'm just going to briefly mention it. And I'm wearing the Dolphins color on the YouTube. So something I will try not to wear when they play the Dolphins in a couple weeks. But after that, it really seemed like he hit his stride, found his balance of aggressiveness. And I think we've seen a more aggressive Mike Macdonald this year where he was still aggressive. But I think fans and people who cover the team, people who watch the team, we're so used to the Don Martindale live by the blitz, die by the blitz mentality. And it just, it was something that never really worked 100%. I mean, we could talk about the Raiders game, week 1 in 2021, the Bears game, that was also 2021. That would lose them games. Mike Macdonald, I think, is more calculated in his aggressiveness. Not that Don Martindale never thought about it, but I just think there's more strategy behind Mike Macdonald in some of these things where we knew Don Martindale as that complex guy. He'll bring everybody to the line. One play, he'll rush all of them. One play, he'll drop all but 3. There was that complexion to it. But Mike Macdonald loves his edge blitzes, the safety blitzes, the corner blitzes. The corner blitz won the game. But one of the Don Martindale specials was dropping defensive linemen into coverage, and Mike Macdonald did it on that 4th down play. Michael Pierce drops back. Broderick Washington drops back. It just feels like there's a new wrinkle every week with him. And if you want to talk stats, I'll remember this time. Ravens have the best passing defense in the NFL. Now, the rushing defense won't tell you that. The same story. They're 21st in the league in net yards per attempt. But they've had teams gash them a little bit in terms of chunk plays where I think it's a little better than the stats indicate, but still that they have had some struggles this year against it. But the pass defense has been incredible because Mike Macdonald has found ways to turn Justin Madubuike, Geno Stone, Brandon Stevens, all these guys into really quality playmakers. And I'm not saying that Mike Macdonald's the only reason. Obviously, Madubuike and Stone and Stevens, all those guys put in the work. They did their thing, and they're having great seasons because of what they've been able to do. But Mike Macdonald knows how to utilize these guys. Mike Macdonald knows how to scheme up a blitz, the stunts, and everything. And it just seems like, along with John Harbaugh, along with Todd Monken, Mike Macdonald is super well liked. I remember Patrick Queen was ecstatic when they made the hire. That was his guy. You know, Mike Macdonald played a bunch of different roles for the Ravens before leaving from Michigan, does the 1 year in Michigan under Jim Harbaugh, then comes back to John as the defensive coordinator. And there have been those rumblings about, well, is Mike Macdonald going to get a head coaching opportunity? There's a lot of worry in Baltimore right now, especially among the fan base about, well, what happens if Mike Macdonald leaves at this point? And Sarah Ellison she does great work over at The Vault. She put a scenario out there. If you remember, Eric DaCosta was kind of put in that Ozzie Newsome, not the role, but he was essentially told by the team, look, you're going to be the next in line once Ozzie steps down. This is your job. And he had interviews. You know, I think the Bears were a team that were interested, and I can't remember exactly. I know the Bears were one, but there were others. And he either turned them down, didn't go to the interviews, and he stayed with the Ravens in an assistant role until Ozzie was ready to step down. He took over. So Sarah said, well, what if Mike Macdonald, the same thing, where the Ravens say, hey, look, we'll pay you as a top defensive assistant, top assistant in the league. And then once John Harbaugh leaves, gets fired, whatever, it's your job. And we're guaranteeing you that job. Maybe it happens. Maybe it doesn't. There are going to be a lot of head coaching opportunities this offseason. There are already 2 with the Raiders and the Panthers. There will probably be more. Maybe Bill Belichick steps down. Is Robert Saleh going to survive in New York with the Jets? Brian Dable, Matt Eberflus, right there. There are a lot of potential openings. So we're going to see. But Mike Macdonald has transformed this defense, and they're an elite unit. They're on pace to be one of the best defenses in Ravens history. And part of it is because, again, just the timing of the things from Mike Macdonald, the scheme that he has, and he's getting the most out of his guys. And the Ravens have done a great job. Eric DeCosta did a great job of bringing guys in to help Mike Macdonald along the way here. But his football mind, he's a young, innovative football mind where the league is going all offense, right? All the talk is about offense. Can you score as many points as possible? But here's this young defensive coach, and there have been young D'Amico Ryans, right, gets the job in Houston. He's done an awesome job over there with Houston after coming over from San Francisco. But in a league that is offense, feels like the Ravens have kind of gone old school, and they've always been a defense team. Like when you think Ravens, you think defense. I think Lamar's kind of changed that a little bit with his arrival, and when you think Ravens now, it's about the electricity and Lamar. But those old school Ravens teams, physical defenses, hard hitting, domination, you're not scoring. And I think that's where we are right now with this Ravens team, with the added element of Lamar and everything that he does on the football field. So I think that this coaching staff so far has done a pretty good job. I mean, I think the assistants also, you got to give shout outs to guys like Anthony Weaver and others as well on the staff. Greg Lewis has done an awesome job with the wide receivers. T. Martin moving over to quarterbacks coach from wide receiver. They made a lot of decisions this offseason with their coaching staff, and I think most of them are paying off for them, is they're getting a lot of contributions from all across the board from, again, players. They go out there, they execute. They're the ones who throw the passes, run the ball, get the interceptions, tackle people. But the coaches, it's on the coaches to get those guys ready, teach technique, and get those players ready to play football. And for the most part, the Ravens coaching staff has done that. There have been some blunders, but every team has those blunders. But again, we're going to learn a lot about this team over the last 5 weeks. They cannot let up. If they begin to do that, we're going to have another conversation about this coaching staff. And obviously, if the playoffs don't go the way that a lot of people want it to for the Ravens, that'll be a whole nother conversation. But for now, I will say that the staff has done a pretty fine job overall. And I'm excited to see how they come out of this bye week, because again, this is a time to refuel. The Ravens have needed this for a long time. The mental reset, the physical reset, it's really important. So we'll see how this team responds to that. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you as always for tuning in here on this show. Coming up tomorrow, you know what it is. More Ravens talk here. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.